Good morning, everyone. I am ARON, MERILL, and as representative of the students, faculty, and staff here at Williston Central School, it is my distinct honor and pleasure to serve as your moderator of the 2018 Williston Central School Candidate Forum. On behalf of our principals, Greg Marino and Jackie Parks, the Social Studies Committee, and the 7th and 8th grade students of Williston, we gratefully welcome all of the candidates who have volunteered time from their personal lives, their busy campaigns, and their positions of public service to be with us here today. Please join me in welcoming our distinguished guests by showing our appreciation with a resounding round of applause. It is our established tradition that we begin our candidate forum with the Pledge of Allegiance. To lead us in this patriotic ceremony, 2 students have been selected from the ranks of this year's Williston Central School upper houses. Bearing the flag of the United States of America is Jasmine, and she will be joined by Pledge Leader Alessandro. Would you please stand? Please stand.
Is it working? Okay. I pledge allegiance to the flag, to the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, individually, with liberty and justice for all. Got it.
And now, ladies and gentlemen, and Williston students, it is time to begin our candidate forum. The format will consist of 3 rounds of questions presented by selected students from the 4 upper houses of Williston Central. Answers from the candidates will be limited to 1.5 minutes each. Our dedicated timekeepers, Jacob and Catherine, will be responsible for keeping the candidates within the time limits. All questions have been prepared by the students in the 7th and 8th grades of the middle school. In the 4th round, each candidate will be given the opportunity to outline their personal goals for the position that they seek and present their vision for a prosperous and peaceful world for the students seated before them. The time limit for the final round will be announced at the end of round 3. A quick note, Republican candidate for Attorney General Jansen Wilhoit may have to leave during the forum due to a work-related conflict, and he wanted us to know the reason ahead of time. And finally, also just a reminder to please turn off any electronic devices that you do have. To begin our forum, we ask that each candidate, starting with this side of the table, my side, introduce yourself and indicate which office you seek. And there's mics right there.
My name is Don Turner. I'm a resident of Milton, and I'm seeking the position of Lieutenant Governor.
My name is Lawrence Zupan. I live in Manchester, Vermont, and I'm seeking the position of U.S. Senator for our great state of Vermont.
My name is ANYA TYNIO, and I'm running for U.S. House of Representatives for the state of Vermont, and I am from West Charleston.
I'm Christine Hallquist, living up on the Green River Reservoir, and I'm honored and humbled to be the Democratic candidate for the governor of Vermont.
I'm Peter Welch from Norwich, Vermont, and I am running for re-election to the United States House of Representatives.
Good morning. I'm Representative Jansen Wilhoit from St. Johnsbury, and I'm honored to be the Republican candidate to be your next Attorney General.
Good morning. I'm Phil Scott. I grew up in Barrie, live in Berlin now, and I'm seeking re-election as governor of Vermont.
Good morning. I'm Jane O'Meara Sanders. I am not seeking election to anything. I am here representing my husband, Senator Bernie Sanders, because Washington kept him in the Senate in session. He asked me to please send his disappointment for not being here today, but I'll try to answer his questions.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for hosting us. I'm David Zuckerman, Vermont's Lieutenant Governor. I live in Heinsberg, and I'm seeking re-election.
Good morning. I'm TJ Donovan. I live in South Burlington. I am the Attorney General, and I am seeking re-election as well as the Democratic nominee. Thanks for having me.
The first question in round one will be presented by Julia for Mr. Zupan.
Mr. Zupan, on your website you dedicate a lot of text describing why voters should not vote for Bernie Sanders, but your own policies and priorities were harder to find. What are your 3 most important priorities for our next U.S. Senator to address?
Thank you, Julia. First of all, let me say what a pleasure and a privilege it is to be here to talk with you today. It does remind me of my own school days when we had the Pledge of Allegiance and we had the assembly every Tuesday morning. It brings back a lot of good memories. So memories is what I don't want the greatness of America to be residing in only. I want the greatness of everything that our country has been to be present and available to all of you as you go out in the world to seek your fortune and to make your living and to raise your families. So one of the greatest priorities any senator could have would be to do 2 things. 1, everything possible to encourage the growth of the economy, and 2, avoiding everything possible that does exactly the opposite. The opposite is increased regulation and increased taxation, which basically chokes off the creative power of free enterprise. Free enterprise is the exact opposite of socialism. Socialism is the collectivization and the joining together of assets and then having them dispersed according to the great wisdom of the government. I believe that the greatest wisdom, according to the Declaration of Independence and Constitution, lies in the individual heart and mind of every student and every person who grows up in this country and wants to fulfill their highest destiny. The next most important thing would be health care. Well, I'll have to get used to being more succinct.
The next question will be presented by Jaden for Governor Scott.
Governor Scott, I noticed that you have nothing on your website on homelessness. During research, I found that there was an 11% increase in homelessness in 2017 and a 5% increase as of 2018. How do you plan to address this problem that is facing Vermont, and what are your views on approaching and fixing homelessness?
Well, thank you for the question. First of all, we're doing a better job tracking homelessness, which is important to all of us. I believe Vermonters, it's part of our DNA. You know, we're compassionate. We want to take care of people. When I first took office, I laid out my guidelines, my principles: grow the economy, make Vermont more affordable, and protect the most vulnerable. And I think we have an obligation to do so. So people facing homelessness are facing complex challenges. They aren't simple. You know, some of it's PTSD, some of it's due to opioids, some of it's due to just poverty and their family issues. So it's very complex. So we funded a pilot street outreach program where we embedded people, outreach professionals into the communities to find out what we can do to help. We also work work with the VHCB, the Vermont Housing Conservation Board, to transition some of the hotels that we have to efficiency apartments, so that we can work with them and bring them on to a better life. Some of it is due to having jobs, security, and so forth. So we, in all regards, we're working towards that. We have a long ways to go. There's nothing we can do alone. We have to work together in order to accomplish that.
Thank you.
The next question will be presented by Stephen for Mr. Donovan.
My question is for Attorney General Donovan. You were Chittenden County State Attorney in November 2006 and re-elected in 2010. In 2014, you obviously were very successful. Where do you think that success came from? And what do you think that makes a good prosecutor? And what could I do as a middle schooler to help my future career if I wanted to be a prosecutor when I grow up?
Stephen, thanks for the question, and it's a great question. Like all of you, I grew up in Vermont. I grew up in Burlington, and I went to public schools. I went to Edmonds Middle School. In fact, Jane Sanders' daughter was in my class, and Griffin Smith's father, who's in the audience, was in my class as well as we went through public school in Vermont. And I think what made me a successful prosecutor was a couple things. I never forgot my experiences of growing up in Vermont and those values that we learn as Vermonters, which are to take care of each other, to look out and stand up for the most vulnerable, to speak out when people are being bullied and when people are being victimized, and to be fair. People talk about the justice system, and I sum up the justice system like this. Justice should be fairness. And whatever that means, given what's going on in today's world, you stand up for people who are being persecuted. You stand up for people who are being bullied. It does not matter in this state who you are. It doesn't matter who you love. It doesn't matter who you worship. It doesn't matter how you identify. We're all Vermonters. We stand up for each other, and we speak out against hate. Those are the values that I learned growing up, just like you, in public school in Vermont. Those are the values that hopefully we all will keep in our hearts, and those are the values that I think have made me a good prosecutor. Thanks for the question.
Thank you.
The next question will be presented by Kennedy for Mr. Zuckerman.
Mr. Zuckerman, you state on your website that your goal is to leave Vermont's land, communities, and economy healthier and stronger for future generations, and I believe changing Vermont's food waste numbers falls into that category. The estimated Vermont food waste of vegetables and berries alone, calculated from surveyed farmer results, is over 1 million pounds each year, not including any tree fruits or other foods. And only about 35% of Vermont's total waste per year gets sent somewhere other than a landfill to be reused, recycled, or composted. How do you see yourself fixing these large Vermont waste issues in the next 2 years for the future generations, or will you not, and why?
Well, thank you, Kennedy. I appreciate the question, and I got into farming. I'm an organic vegetable, pork, and chicken farmer, in large part because I think about what our basic needs are, of which food is obviously one of the most basic needs we have, and into organic farming in large part because of the environment and how our food production system impacts our land and our water and even our air. But you're absolutely right. There's a whole backside of producing food. What happens to the food that is wasted, and why is it wasted? Some of it is wasted because in the store, everybody wants to buy the perfect looking food. And when farmers are producing food, it isn't always looking exactly right. It doesn't come out perfectly. So one of the things I talk about a lot is encouraging folks to buy the food that doesn't always look perfect, even though it's completely consumable and healthy and good to eat. We also have a state program around universal recycling and composting. And we've done that in the legislature. I think it's been slowed down a little bit, but we're working to make sure food waste from restaurants is collected and composted so it can be healthy, fertile soil for the next round of production. And I would just say on our farm, we actually donate between 5,000 and 10,000 pounds of food to the food shelf and other food service needs to meet folks' needs. Sometimes it's those seconds. Sometimes it's food that we overproduce and don't have a market for. But also it's important for everybody to remember, take the portion that fits what you need. Because really that waste is accumulation of each person, a little quarter pound of food here and a half pound there every single day that goes into the compost instead of, or trash. Thank you.
Thank you.
The next question will be presented by Betty for Ms. Sanders.
Ms. Sanders, on the Senator's website, one issue mentioned is a fair and humane immigration policy. What will he do to help families that are still separated because of the new immigration system?
He has been very, very active in terms of immigration. As you mentioned, there are a lot of families still separated, and they're working in a number of ways to address that. One of the things, our immigration system has been broken for a long time. We have many, many people that are being deported every day still, being stopped on buses and brought aside to be deported without any understanding about who they are, what they're doing. Here in Vermont, we have a lot of ag workers that are undocumented workers, and some of them have experienced great stress and difficulty. Thank goodness the state of Vermont treats people more fairly. I think that one of the things that he's talked about is to have there be fairness, as TJ said. Justice really equals fairness. What we need to do is keep families together. They're making progress. There's about 10% of the children that have been separated from their families that are still separated. And there's a lot of pressure on ICE down in Washington and Homeland Security. They meet regularly and fight on these issues and ask for reports. And we've actually been very, very active in that.
Thank you.
That was not the question.
The next question will be presented by Morgan for Ms. Hallquist.
Ms. Hallquist, in 2016, there were 101 opioid-related deaths. What will you do to address this growing problem in our state?
Thank you for that very important question. First I'm going to talk about in terms of how we've dealt with these issues over the many years of something that doesn't work, and then I'm going to talk about what's working. We've spent $1 trillion since Richard Nixon declared the war on drugs, and we haven't changed drug use at all. But we've disrupted families and pretty much targeted people by race. But we have something that's working very well. In Burlington, we had a big problem with needles on the streets years ago. And the folks in Burlington, they had discussed having a needle exchange called the Howard Safe Recovery Center. Finally, the town voted to put that in place. And of course, what people said is, look, we don't want these people in our neighborhoods, but these people are in your neighborhoods. And I met with Grace Keller. I spent the afternoon at the needle exchange several weeks ago. And she's the person who's the boots on the ground. And they actually, last year, they exchanged 300,000 needles, and only 81 were found on the streets, and they picked them all up, virtually eliminating the problem. But I also tell you what's even more impressive is that those clean needles will offset 6 heart valve transplants a year. That's about $3.7 million. Her budget's only $420,000. So we can add a full-time nurse to that so people can get immediate help when they want to deal with their substance use issues. And I would repeat that model throughout the entire state because it's a very effective model. And the final point I'll make is, this issue affects all of us. No matter what age you are, no matter where you are.
Thank you.
The next question will be presented by Evan for Mr. Turner.
Mr. Turner, Vermont is known for its beautiful mountain views. With new developments going into cities and towns, like downtown Burlington, do you think there should be any height limits on buildings in Vermont?
Thank you very much, Evan, for the question. As a 4th-generation Vermonter and a lifelong resident of Vermont, I agree that Vermont is known for its beautiful mountains and views of lakes and so on. I do support new development and economic growth in our cities and towns, like downtown Burlington. And yes, I do believe that we should have height limits on buildings in Vermont. These limits, though, should be set and controlled by the local communities. I don't believe one size fits all. What works in Burlington won't work in Milton or in Cabot. So yes, I do believe that we should have height limits. Thank you.
Thank you.
The next question will be presented by Emma for Mr. Welch.
Mr. Welch, the total annual rainfall and amount of storms in Vermont has increased over the last 50 years, causing costly damage in many communities. Our winters are getting warmer and shorter, threatening winter sports and tourism. Summer days are getting hotter. Scientists expect these trends to continue. What do you plan on doing to help combat climate changes happening in the United States and Vermont?
Well, thank you very much. mean, first of all, we have to acknowledge that climate change is real, that it exists. It's a threat to our planet. And in Washington, as strange as this may seem, there's a lot of folks, including the president, who denies that climate change is real. So let's take on the challenge, because a confident country doesn't deny problems, it addresses them. And I'd say two things. Number one, personally, everybody can do something. Don't use plastic. Use a reusable water bottle. Don't use plastic straws. Individually, we can act. But then collectively, we should be in the Paris Climate Accords. We should be having policies that encourage people to be more efficient in their houses and heating, to tighten up the house and save on the use of energy. And then third, we've got to work with folks who are being affected by the transition from a carbon economy to a clean economy. I went to a coal mine in West Virginia, and it's a lot of good folks there who have worked hard. And those mine workers didn't create climate change, but they've kept the lights on here for us, but they're being affected by it. So part of what we have to do is provide economic relief for the transition in those communities like coal country, where really, really good people work really, really hard, but are being affected by it, and let them know, let all of us know that we're in it together to address climate change. And this is the biggest challenge young people will inherit. Thank you.
Thank you.
The next question will be presented by Sally for Mr. Wilhoit.
My question is for Mr. Wilhoit. What are you going to do to institute criminal justice reform for juveniles?
Thank you, Sally, for the question. For the past 6 years, I've been honored and privileged to serve as a juvenile defender in the state of Vermont, and also I've served the last 4 years in the legislature and the last 2 in the House Judiciary Committee. And in that role in the Judiciary Committee, I co-sponsored and helped work on youthful offender status reform. Before I came into office, kids that were charged as adults still started in criminal court, in adult court, and actually the state of Vermont, the prosecutors had to make the determination, well, are we going to send it over to juvenile court? Well, we changed that, and actually that took effect of July 1st of this year. But I must warn you, unfortunately, there's still some kinks in the system. As an offender, even just this past week, I put a motion for one of my 18-year-olds to be transferred over, but the whole system was still awry. When we got there, the court didn't have the processes yet to really begin the system in place. And so, as your Attorney General, I'll work to streamline the process. There should be no more red tape. You know, I'm also a foster parent, and so I get youth development. I get the fact that kids, yeah, do wrong acts, but we shouldn't be treating them like grown hard criminals. We should start in juvenile court, and I will make sure that every juvenile starts at that spot. Thank you.
Thank you.
The next question will be presented by ANYA for Ms. TYNIO.
Ms. TYNIO, in light of the recent school shootings, there's been a lot of concern about school safety. On March 24th, 2018, 250,000 people marched in a student-led demonstration advocating for increased protection so that student safety isn't constantly jeopardized. What are the steps you would take to make schools safer for us?
Thank you very much. The first thing that I want to address is putting together a committee that will look at the underlying cause of the shootings. Whether that is bullying, anybody here may be able to relate that there's somebody that's bullied that may feel angry, whether there are mental health issues that comprise to make this problem. I think that the fact that 250,000 people marched shows that they want to do something themselves to help with this problem. And each and every person in this room can begin that by reaching out to someone that they feel might be feeling alone and dejected, and reaching out to them and talking to them and reporting to parents or teachers if they feel that somebody is truly a threat to themselves or others. I think that those are all very important things for the country and for you as students to do to prevent these problems. Prevention is the best thing that we can possibly do for this. And putting a Band-Aid on the issue, such as gun control, is not going to solve the underlying causes. So we need to look at the underlying causes and correct them. Thank you.
That is the end of round one. To begin round two, the first question will be presented by Julia for Ms. Sanders.
Ms. Sanders, Senator Sanders wants to make college tuition debt-free. His plan is to pay for college by applying a $75 billion in taxes on Wall Street speculators. How will paying for college with this tax impact the stock market and our economy?
Thank you. I think first we have to talk about national priorities. How a government spends its money actually shows what we value. I imagine many of you will go to college at some point, and one of the things that stops people or worries them and worries their families is the cost of college. So we have to address that. Senator Sanders believes that the best way to address it is to recoup some of the money that we gave to Wall Street as taxpayers in 2008 when financial speculation, Wall Street speculation, cost people all over this country a lot of money, and our government, we bailed it out with $700 billion. So it would take almost 10 years to recoup that in this Wall Street speculation tax. We have had that tax before as a country. There are 10 countries that are now having it or trying to implement it. The idea is that it not only brings the money in, but it also gets people to not do the fast trading that caused the problems in 2008. So we think that a point, 0.5% on the fast trading will not cost much in terms of stocks, and it'll be used in a better way.
Thank you.
The next question will be presented by Jaden for Mr. Turner.
Mr. Turner, on your website you stated that you needed to help rein in taxes and stop the trend of higher taxes. You also stated on your website that we needed to ensure the safety of the children in public/local schools, which will cost a lot of taxpayer money. How will you accomplish both at the same time without continuing the trend of higher taxes?
Thank you very much, Jaden. As I travel around the state in this campaign, I hear from all corners of the state how expensive it is to live in this state. So I have, for the last 13 years, fought to rein in spending and keep taxes down, and I will continue to do so if elected. I do not believe it. I did fully support the $5 million in school safety grants, and I do believe that protecting our students, such as all of you, is one of the most important jobs of our government. What I did in Milton as the town manager, I went to the police chief and asked him to have patrol officers be at every drop-off and pickup of every day of school. We have implemented that in Milton, and that's one way we can address school safety without additional cost. Thank you, Jaden.
Thank you.
The next question will be presented by Sally for Mr. Donovan.
My question is for Mr. Donovan. On March 20th, 2015, many citizens paid an affordable rate and complied with the law at the Superior Court to get their licenses back. How does your driver restoration program work? What is an affordable rate for this?
Thank you, Sally. Let me start with a basic belief that I have. Being poor is not a crime. But if you go into any jail in the state of Vermont, you are going to see the poor. You go into any courthouse in the state of Vermont, it's going to be overwhelmingly represented by the poor and increasingly people of color of this state. And we spend far too money on our Department of Corrections system. We spend more money locking people up in this state than we do on putting money towards higher education, sending money in terms of student loans for kids to go to UVM, Johnson, and Castleton. I don't think that's a priority for anybody. And when you ask about outcomes, the recidivism rate, which is the failure rate, is over 50% in this state, meaning people who get out of jail are back in jail within 3 years. And so everybody should be for reforming our criminal justice system because it is about enhancing our public safety for all of us and providing opportunity for all of us. Now, on the driver restoration, what happened was this. When people couldn't pay because they couldn't get to work, we told them to pay more money, and then we would put them in jail. And when government doesn't work for people, we as elected leaders have a simple responsibility to actually have the guts to say our policies don't work. And when we have to hit the reset button, we should. And we should give people an opportunity to get ahead. And it shouldn't be driven by people down in Montpelier. It should be driven by people who are in the community who need the opportunity to get to work, to provide for their families, to give a better life to their kids.
Thank you.
The next question will be presented by Betty for Ms. Halquist.
Ms. Hallquist, Vermont is trying to reach a 90% renewable energy supply. Why not 95% or more? Do you have any plans to reach an even higher renewable energy supply in the future?
Thank you, Betty. I love that question. You know, I committed my life to solving climate change. I was the CEO of Vermont's second largest utility, and I knew the electric grid would be the key to solving climate change. So when I left in March, we were essentially carbon-free, 96% carbon-free, offering people money to move away from fossil fuel heating, cooling, and transportation, and we did it without raising rates for 5 years. I wanted to prove to the world that you can solve climate change and it does not need to cost more money. And I will tell you, that was exciting work. You know, we attracted some of the best young engineers, and we were doing all kinds of innovative work. And so Vermont exports about $2 billion a year to the fossil fuel industry. That money will spur such exciting jobs in Vermont. I actually participated on a plan that's really one of the best in the country. It's called the Solar Pathways Plan. It's the detailed plan how to get us to 90% by 2050. So we have that plan. I would make that the comprehensive energy plan for the state. And we all can be excited about pulling together to solve climate change. But then we will go to the next level because, of course, we have to get to 100% renewable. Because the only way we can effectively run in terms of long-term health of this planet is to make sure we're only consuming the amount of energy that comes to the planet daily by the sun, as well as anything we can harness from geothermal. But we have the technology to get there. It'll create exciting jobs, and it'll create a great future for all of you.
Thank you.
The next question will be presented by Kennedy for Ms. TYNIO.
Ms. TYNIO, approximately 11.5 million illegal immigrants come to the U.S. each year. How do you think the government should respond to this illegal immigrant crisis?
Thank you. First of all, it's important to realize that anybody coming to the United States, illegally or legally, is coming here because they want to seek a better life. In order to fully enjoy the benefits of this country, you need to be a citizen. So anybody that is coming to this country, first and foremost, needs to focus on becoming a citizen and becoming a productive member of our society. That is imperative. The government cannot allow illegal immigration to continue at the rate that it has without removing them from the country, because we have to know who is in the country to protect our citizens. We need stronger immigration laws, and in the end, that is a kinder and nicer way of dealing with immigration than what we currently allowed under the previous administration, because if somebody understands going in that this is the process they will have to take, there will be less confusion, and we can avoid instances like we've had on the southern border over this past year. Once again, definitely moving towards citizenship as quickly as possible. The illegal immigrants that are here currently need to be looking into every avenue to do that. And if they are ineligible for citizenship due to criminal records or some other reason, then they do need to be removed from this country. Thank you.
Thank you.
The next question will be presented by Stephen for Mr. Wilhoit.
My question is for Mr. Wilhoit. You said you want to have a more transparent government. How do you plan on achieving this?
Thank you, Stephen. One of the things I've most enjoyed about Vermont is how open and transparent we truly are. I don't know if you've been, or you or your classmates have had a chance to House. But one of the things that's remarkable about our State House, unlike the White House or up in Washington, we don't have a lot of security. We don't have to go through metal detectors or anything. We're a very open government. Our constituents expect that. Our state expects that. That's the Vermont way. But the reality is, there were bad actors in every level. There are bad actors privately, there are bad actors publicly. And then again, as an open government, we expect that both citizens and our press have the right to those records. And so as your Attorney General, my first answer is not going to be no to what is the right of the public, but it's yes. And so I believe that that is the only way to be a truly open and transparent government. Thank you.
Thank you.
The next question will be presented by Morgan for Mr. Zuckerman.
Mr. Zuckerman, my question is about the Lake Champlain cleanup effort. I've read in the news that the effort has not gone well, words like fizzled and D+ grade. Are there plans to improve the cleanup effort in the near future? And could you please provide some detail on how?
Morgan, thank you for the question. I also want to just compliment all of you on your enthusiasm for the people asking the questions. Supporting each other, especially in middle school ages, is great. I have a 12-year-old daughter, and I know that can be challenging out there, so that support for each other is really great to see. With respect to Lake Champlain cleanup in the waterways of the state, I served in the Senate when we proposed a $25 per parcel fee, so we would have started to generate between $20 and $25 million a year to pay for cleanup programs for the state, whether it's diverting pollution or also working to pull pollution out of the water. Unfortunately, that did not get through the process 4 years ago, so we're already $80 to $100 million behind where we could have been in that cleanup. I think it's important for elected candidates and leaders to step up when we have these problems rather than keep kicking the problem down the road. So I would still support something to that effect, $20 to $25 per household or property across the state, because our waterways are fundamental to our health, clean drinking water, to our economy, tourism, fishing, the landscape, the view, the water for swimming in. When you can't swim in it, that hurts our tourism economy. We need to have elected folks who are willing to stand up to say, yes, this is worth funding, and it's worth raising the funding in order to do so, because it's going to benefit all Vermonters. And so that includes supporting farms mitigate situations on their land. It includes supporting municipalities in diverting the rainwater from mixing with sewage water going into the lake, and Burlington's working towards that, and I support those efforts.
Thank you.
The next question will be presented by Evan for Mr. Zupan.
Mr. Zupan, on your website you mentioned that there's too much government intervention in business today. How do you plan on changing this?
Thank you, Evan. To begin with, one must change one's basic attitude towards business. Business should not be looked at as a government's milk cow to take as much taxes as possible and then to redistribute it according to the wisdom of the legislators who had nothing to do with earning those dollars. So what is the biggest intervention that needs to be closely studied and dealt with? The biggest intervention is unnecessary taxes. And our great Vermont president, Calvin Coolidge, said, taking more taxes from the citizens than is absolutely necessary is nothing but legalized theft. So, as your senator, I do not want to participate in legalized theft or any other kind. So one of the first things I will do is look at where is it that we can reduce taxes? Because by reducing taxes, we put the money or leave the money in the hands of those who've earned it. And nobody uses money more constructively, more productively, and with greater results than the people who earned it. If you have a job, you've probably already begun to learn that lesson. The other thing is unnecessary government regulation. The government has, over the decades and generations, seen fit to encroach itself into more and more of the decision-making that really ought to be left, if not in the hands of the citizens, at the most local level, because nobody understands the issues at hand better than the people who have the boots on the ground in the local community.
Thank you.
The next question will be presented by Emma for Governor Scott.
Governor Scott, people are leaving Vermont because there are a lack of quality jobs and there are better opportunities in other states. How can you improve job availability and bring back people to Vermont?
Well, thank you very much for the question, Emma. Having a good paying job is really important to each and every one of us. It's important for the security of our families. It has a ripple effect across our economy. And my administration has worked really hard to focus on the economy, trying to bring more business into the state. We've been successful over the years in doing that. The reality is there's a lot of jobs open right here in Vermont right now. When you go to the southern part of the state, Mac Molding they have a sign out there for 100 people right now. I went to UTC Aerospace in Virgins 2 weeks ago. They're hiring 150 people right now, 50 of them being engineers, and they're going to pay $100,000 salary every single year. So whether you're up at the Revision Eyewear, they're hiring, GE in Rutland's hiring, NSA up in the Northeast Kingdom is hiring. The problem is we don't have the people to fill them. Because of our demographics, we're getting older, and we don't have as many youth here in the state. So we have to be more attractive. We're going to have to figure out a way, and we're trying to attract more people to come to the state, but it has to be affordable for them. And they have to have a job, and they have to have a good affordable housing as well. So we're focusing on all those areas, trying to attract more people. I think immigration is part of that, the answer as well. We need more diversity in this state. And I believe that we're on track to do that. We all have to pull in the same direction in order to do it. We have to acknowledge we have a demographic issue in this state. We have to solve it together. But it's the jobs are there. We have 2,500 jobs open right now.
Thank you.
The next question will be presented by ANYA for Mr. Welch.
Mr. Welch, in 2016, there were 27 million people who lacked health insurance in the United States. The main cause of uninsured Americans is affordability. Almost 10% of our population doesn't have health care, and the main reason is because they can't afford it for their families. Do you have any plans to make health care more affordable? If so, what are they?
I do. You know, every single person in this country, whether they're poor or they're rich, whether they have pre-existing conditions or they don't, should have access to affordable health care. Every other country has it. It's the United States that doesn't. Yet we spend the most. We spend way more than European countries, but we get less and our outcomes aren't better. Now, why is that? A major reason is because the market in healthcare is totally broken. And the money that we spend oftentimes goes to pay incredible salaries. Like the head of Celgene, $100 million he got paid 1 year. And you know how he got paid that? They boosted the price of life-saving drugs that we then couldn't afford. And we've got to crack down on the excessive spending in healthcare that goes to profits for like pharmaceutical companies, for-profit hospital networks. We've got to have a commitment that everybody has access to health care. Medicare for all is something I support. And if we had Medicare for all, and we fixed a broken market and dealt with some of these $100 million salaries, can you imagine that? We'd be able to have health care for everybody. And let me just give an example. There was a family in Burlington that had an ill member, and the drug that they could get in England for a couple $100 was going to cost $84,000 here. Think about that. Thank you.
And ANYA is up again to start round 3 for Ms. TYNIO.
Okay. Ms. TYNIO, according to the National Association of Student Financial Aid Administrators in 2016, low-income students could not afford 95% of colleges. This is the main reason as to why 60% of Americans don't have a college degree. Do you have any plans to make college more affordable? If so, what are they?
Thank you. It's important that we understand education in our nation is very important, and we need to compete on the world stage as leaders in the fields that we choose to do that in. That is very important. I wholeheartedly support that. As far as making college more affordable, it comes down to an economic issue. we need to have jobs and careers that can support the education, the cost of the education that it takes to get to them. And that comes to strengthening our economy, bringing in more business and keeping jobs in our country, and providing them to the students that graduate so that they can now start paying for the education. As far as lowering the costs, I do think that the colleges can do more to lower the costs of education, taking into account salaries of the professors, the different costs for facilities, what can be done to make them more efficient and affordable. All of that, I think, can be done in the private sector, not necessarily with government oversight, but it is an economic issue, and having the jobs to support the educational requirements is necessary. Thank you.
The next question will be presented by Stephen for Mr. Wilhoit.
My question is for Mr. Wilhoit. To date, if you could go back and say one achievement that you are most proud of so far in your life, what would it be and why? How do you think that achievement might help you in office if you were to get elected?
Thank you, Stephen. To be honest with you, I'm the luckiest person alive. Vermont gave me a second chance that I will never forget. When I was thinking about this question, I thought, wow, I mean, the very fact that I was able to go to law school, became an attorney, for the past 6 years representing the least among us, being in the legislature the last 4, getting to be an adopted and foster parent to the most amazing kids in the state is all wonderful. But all that really brought me to my greatest achievement, I think, here in my professional life was just a couple of years ago. In mid-December, before Governor Scott took office, my dear friend Don Turner down at the inn gave me a call because he was concerned because our previous governor wanted to seat a Supreme Court justice in Vermont that wasn't retiring until April. And Don was like, he can't do that, can he? Let me sue him. And so, as lawyers do, I figured out how can I do that. I found this ancient writ. I don't want to get in all the aspects, but that's how we got there. We got to the Supreme Court. Like within 2 weeks, I got to argue against the Solicitor General, the state's best attorney, and we won. And it was amazing, but also it reminded me that anybody can do anything. And that's the beauty of Vermont. And as your Attorney General, I will fight for you just as hard as I fought for Don, just as hard as I fight for every single kid and woman and man that I represent every day. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next question will be presented by Jaden for Mr. Welch.
Mr. Welch, recent statistics show that there have been 35,141 deaths due to gun violence so far in the year. How do you think we can reduce the amount of gun-related deaths in the U.S.?
Well, thank you so much. You know, this is an issue that affects all of us, but it affects you maybe more than anyone. What we've seen among those deaths are an epidemic of shootings in schools. And you remember last year, the kids in Parkland got killed. And then right here in Vermont, in Fairhaven, almost a school shooting where the person who was contemplating doing it had as a goal to have the highest body count of any mass shooting in a school in history. That is such a problem. And the leadership to start getting us to talk about gun safety came from students in Parkland, and then the rally in Montpelier where it was led by students, some of whom might have been there with your parents, but it was all student-led. So there's lots of issues about mental health, about reaching out to your fellow students. But gun safety is part of it. And our legislature passed legislation signed by our governor that provided some gun safety legislation that I think is good and was overdue. It is everybody who's going to get a gun has to have a background check, know who it is. Should we have assault weapons, which are used on the battlefield in Afghanistan and Iraq, freely available? I don't think so. These are things that are really important. Gun safety legislation that can provide protection to our citizens can be done consistent with the Second Amendment right that Vermonters have enjoyed for generations. So thank you.
Thank you.
The next question will be presented by Betty for Mr. Turner.
Mr. Turner, one of your main campaign promises is to reduce the cost of living for our citizens. What state services do you plan to cut budgets for to diminish taxes? Additionally, what other plans do you have related to this issue?
Thank you, Betty. As I stated earlier, I believe that the cost of living is the #1 issue facing Vermonters as I travel around the state today. I believe that government, like our households and our businesses, has to live within its means. This year, the state of Vermont saw an unexpected increase in revenue of over $40 million. We could have used that money and not raised taxes at all. So I think that we have to live in government within the means of the government. And #2, I believe that we should evaluate and remove regulatory hurdles that make it much more expensive to live here. Things could get done sooner and less expensive. And finally, I have no plans to make big cuts in state government. However, there are a lot of inefficiencies in state government in my 13 years in the legislature that I've become aware of, and that we have to find ways to make those more efficient. And that means that we could and we should look at eliminating programs that are duplicative in the services they provide. So thank you, Betty.
Thank you.
Next question will be presented by Kennedy for Ms. Hallquist.
Ms. Hallquist, on your website, you state that you want to ensure safety in schools. How do you plan to take precautions on gun violence and other dangerous situations for students, especially during a time of increased discussion on gun control and mental health?
Thank you, Kennedy. First of all, I want to make a point following on what Congressman Welch just discussed. I want to talk about the Parkland students, and I really want to get a message to all of you that, you know, those Parkland students rose up and they spoke to the adults, and they said to the adults, we need common sense gun laws, and the adults responded. So, you know, this is your future, and that's, I want you to reaffirm the importance of your democracy and standing up. That was very, that moved me quite a bit. You know, I also will say, you know, our legislature passed some common sense gun laws this year, and I certainly respect and honor the governor for signing those bills. You know, so we can do common sense gun laws without impacting the hunting and the other sport-related guns for sports. But I will tell you, the most important thing we can focus on is emotional safety. I was a CEO of an organization that was the most dangerous business that there is, line workers. And we got the highest award in the nation. Of 1,000 co-ops across the country, we are the only one that got this award, and only a few large utilities got this award. And we got this award because we focused on emotional safety. What we found is that most accidents and most things occurred because people were in fear or stressed out. So the most important thing I would focus on is creating emotional safety in the schools.
Thank you.
Next question will be presented by Morgan for Ms. Sanders.
Ms. Sanders, on Senator Sanders' website, it states that Republican Party is more concerned about protecting the profit of companies like Exxon and the rights of individuals. What do you suggest the U.S. senators should do to serve individuals over corporations?
Thank you for the question. I think that one of the things that we go back to is national priorities. It's no question that the White House, the Senate, and the House are controlled by the Republican Party, and we're seeing firsthand every day that they're more concerned with corporations than the common good. So one of the things, I mean, obviously we've given tax cuts, enormous tax cuts for billionaires and corporations. What we have been doing also is cutting, or they have been doing, is cutting regulations on environmental protection. They're investing in fossil fuels. We think they should be investing in renewable energies. That helps people all over the country, all over the world. He believes that the government should be focused on the quality of life, improving the quality of life of families in this country and individuals in this country. That means Medicare for all, affordable housing, a livable wage. Perhaps you've seen that He went to Disney when Disney workers were living in tents because they couldn't afford housing when they were working at Disney, some of the low-level ones. They came up with an increase. He then pushed Amazon to be able to finally, they decided to have a minimum of a $15 minimum wage. That affects 350,000 people across the country, including temporary workers. So his thought is the United States senators should be focused on the people, not the corporations, and then the corporations will do quite well.
Thank you.
The next question will be presented by Evan for Mr. Zuckerman.
Mr. Zuckerman, Vermont's population is decreasing. How does this affect the taxes for the Vermonters that stay? For example, would it affect the education system or the property taxes or the health care plans?
Well, thank you for the question. And one of the key parts in talking about this challenge is that this is not just a Vermont problem, it's actually a rural America problem. Sometimes folks paint it as the regulations or the taxes in Vermont are the problem, but actually rural red parts of this country are equally declining in population and losing young people who want to go to urban areas. So the first thing with any kind of question is to make sure we know the full context of the situation, and that way we don't quickly go to sort of political soundbite answers. Now, one of the things that's happened in Vermont is there's actually been sort of an attack on our schools politically, and that we have to spend less money and our teachers get paid too much, and sort of attacks on our teachers for doing the job they do to inspire you to become great citizens of our state and employees for those great jobs that our governor spoke about. We need to be talking about how good our schools are. Compared to rural parts of the other rest of the country, our schools are much, much better, our public schools. We could attract young families if we talked about how good our schools are, not beating up on them all the time. We also need to increase access to higher education. I am a product of coming to Vermont to seek higher education. I got a great education at the University of Vermont. I stayed here, I started a business, I now employ 3 people, 4 people year-round, and 8 or 9 seasonal employees every year. Many, many people who are here in Vermont came to Vermont to go to higher education. We need to support that for not only our Vermonters' access to higher education, but also to draw other people in. And finally, I would also say universal health care. Entrepreneurs lose their health care if they lose the job they have or leave to start a business. If we had universal health care, people would come here to start businesses.
Thank you.
The next question will be presented by Sally for Mr. Donovan.
Mr. Donovan, you and your opponent seem to think Vermont should focus on different things. Why is your path better?
Thanks, Sally. I believe in being the people's lawyer as Attorney General. That means standing up and protecting Vermonters. Number one, that means addressing the opiate crisis in this state. That's why I sued Purdue Pharma, the manufacturer of OxyContin, who I believe started this crisis in the state, and they should be held accountable. Number two, when the federal government steps back, I believe Vermont should step up. That means protecting everybody's civil rights because we're all equal in this state, period. Secondly, it's about defending and protecting our environment because pollution doesn't know state borders. That's why we need a strong EPA regulatory system, and Vermont has always led the way on that. It's also about making sure that Vermonters don't get ripped off. That means strong consumer protection laws because Vermonters deserve a fair deal. And finally, and I feel very strongly about this, I trust Vermonters. We're a small state. We're a state of small businesses. You just heard Lieutenant Governor Zuckerman talk about his small business. And as an Attorney General, we have to understand that Vermont's backbone is small businesses. That means we have to reach out and trust Vermonters and ask a simple question. What do you need to be successful? What can government do for you so you can grow your business, so we can grow jobs, so we can provide opportunity for everybody in this state? A good job is the best form of public safety. That's why I'm running for Attorney General.
Thank you.
The next question will be presented by Emma for Governor Scott.
Governor Scott, I have a question about increasing the minimum wage in Vermont. The average shift for a small business is 8 hours a day. The minimum wage is $10.50. If you have 15 employees working each day and you raise the minimum wage to $15 each person, they'd receive $36 more, and that means that it's an extra $540 in total per day. Annually, that adds up to $193,860. Small businesses usually make up to $68,000 a year. How will these businesses be able to afford the increase in salaries without laying people off?
Well, thank you very much. It brings up a good point. And I want all Vermonters to make more money and keep more of what they earn. I think that's why I'm focused so much on the economy and making Vermont more affordable. But I worry about our small businesses in the state. I was one for over 30 years of my life. And I worry particularly about the rural areas of our state. When you look at, here's the problem. When you look at New Hampshire, for instance, along the eastern quarter of our state, along the Connecticut River, those businesses are just struggling to get by. Those small mom and pop businesses are just hanging on by a thread. When right across the border, right across the river, we're faced with New Hampshire. New Hampshire has a minimum wage of $7.25 tied to the federal rate. So $7.25. They don't have any income tax, they don't have any sales tax, and they don't have any corporate tax. So it's very difficult for a business to survive there. Chittenden County does pretty well. Could be better, but it does pretty well here. So I'm just worried that if we take a blanket approach and try to raise the minimum wage throughout, we're going to force a lot of businesses out of business in those rural areas that are struggling so much. So we need to continue to work and be as flexible as we can and raise the wages of all people, focus on the economy, bring more people in. Like I said before, we have jobs available, but we need more people here in order to perform that. So again, it's a good point, and that's why I'm so concerned about just artificially raising that. And I think the Congress should do their job, and they should raise the rate for those in places like New Hampshire.
Thank you.
The final question for round 3 will be presented by Julia for Mr. Zupan.
Mr. Zupan, on your website you describe the business-friendly approach of Zug, Switzerland. Could you describe the key parts of Zug's business-friendly approach and how we will implement an approach like this in Vermont?
Yes, thank you so much, Julia. The business-friendly approach of a small canton in Zug, an area that is somewhat reminiscent of our own neighborhood here in Vermont, there was a period where they did an experiment where they lowered the corporate income tax to 15%. They lowered the personal income tax to 22.9%. And in a 6-year period, here's what happened. Unemployment went down to 1.9%. They went from 19,000 jobs to 30,000 jobs. And they had a 1.9%, 1.9% vacancy rate as well in the buildings that existed in Zug. So what happened there? What happened was the lower taxes attracted money, attracted investment, and everything grew, and everybody prospered. That's the same principle that we need to be able to apply here. As we just heard from Governor Scott, we're at a competitive disadvantage with New Hampshire across the river. But here's the good news. With the coming broadband connectivity, with the satellites that are going to cover the state of Vermont, we're going to not only have the most beautiful and magnetic state, but we're also going to have potentially the most business-friendly one. Because what will the various eco niches of the 256 towns be like when a little business can have wide broadband pipe into every little village and hamlet of Vermont? We won't have to invite people with a $10,000 bribe. They'll want to be here. Rural renewal.
Thank you.
And that's the end of round 3. We would like to give each candidate a minute and a half for closing remarks, and we will start with Governor Scott.
Thank you again very much for having us here this morning. I'd like to talk for a minute about leadership. We're at a point in time in our nation where we become so divided, and it's clear to me that we in Vermont have an opportunity to set an example for the rest of the world on how to act. And I believe if we can rise above all the mudslinging, we can be better role models for you and treat each other with dignity and respect, we'll get a long ways. It's important that we don't let those differences and those disagreements divide us. We must instead lead by example and show our youth, like you, that we can have important emotional debates with both conviction and passion as well as civility. We can prove that we are stronger united, and there's more that unites us than divides us, and we can lead by example. And I'm really concerned about what's happening in society, particularly with social media, how we treat each other when we're behind a keyboard, saying things that we never said to one another face to face. And from my standpoint, that's cowardly. And we should have those debates, but we should do so. We should treat each other better. And it's up to us as adults, to show you how to act and how to act appropriately, even when we disagree. So I thank you for what you've done today. You've proven to us, you treat us civilly, and we can do the same. This is something that's important to our nation and our civilization.
Mr. Zuckerman.
A real honor to serve as your lieutenant governor for the last 2 years. And when I got elected to office, I pledged that I would be working towards building our rural economy, working on supporting our public education system, both elementary and high school, as well as more access and more affordability towards higher education. And I would really commit myself towards renewable energy and a climate, environment, and jobs that would make it so that my 12-year-old daughter and all of your lives in the future here in Vermont would be able to be that life that those here have grown up with the environment that we have, not the environment of Virginia or Texas, or eventually even Texas if climate change continues in the way it has. But really on that election day, things changed tremendously in this country. Our democracy has really been challenged by the actions of some people in Washington. And so part of my job has also been primarily as an ambassador for democracy, traveling the state, talking with school groups, Rotaries, businesses, and others about how we can work together to solve our state's challenges. I've had an open town hall on Facebook for a half an hour every week to talk about the issues in Montpelier, welcoming people from different perspectives on the issues, to have conversations in a little more depth than the 2-minute soundbite, so we can work together to find solutions. I've put out an electronic newsletter to some of your parents. Anybody who wants it can go to ltgov.vermont.gov to talk about the issues that are facing Vermont with links to more information, again, so we can talk in depth and civilly about the issues that face our state. And I hope that I'll have another opportunity for 2 more years. Thank you.
Mr. Zupan.
Our country, the United States of America, has fed, clothed, housed in security more people than any other country in the history of the world. And it has done it with having enough left over to spread its abundance to other countries in need. Before I go forward, let me just tell you the story of Wrongway Regal. In the 1929 Rose Bowl, he ran down the field with complete zeal, scored a touchdown. It was great. Only one problem. It was in his opponent's end zone. So it's not enough to have good intentions or to work hard. You must run in the right direction. As long as our country has run in the direction of free enterprise and individual opportunity, we have scored touchdowns in the correct end zones. The 39 countries in recent history who have tried socialism have all failed. It's 39-0. Why would we want to trade our success for socialist failure? Can't be explained. Let me ask you, which political model or which politician is the most caring and compassionate? One who promises free Medicare, free tuition, free everything, all of which cannot and will never be delivered? Or the one who promises a workable plan based on human effort and creativity in the way that Americans have made to work for 242 years? The role of the government is to secure the enjoyment of your freedom. The role of government is not to substitute itself for your parents after you grow up. This is not bad news. This is simply real life. I'm excited for all the wonderful opportunity to create anything, and I look forward as your senator to letting me help you invent your future. Thank you.
Mr. Donovan.
Thank you. I was just directing Lieutenant Governor Zuckerman to take photos of the front row here because they wanted to. I want to thank Williston Central School for having us today, and I really want to commend the students who asked the questions. They were great, they were tough, they were fair, and I want to thank all the students. Look, I'm sitting up here in large part because I'm a product of a community much like this, where I grew up with a strong public school system, a strong community, in an area that gave me space to frankly make mistakes, gave me space to learn from those mistakes and to grow. And I think that's what we do well in Vermont. And we need to continue to do that, but we also have to understand that the starting line for life is not the same for everybody. And there is inequality that exists in this state. There are injustices that exist in this state. And we have an obligation to speak out about them and work to fix them, to work to provide opportunity for everybody in this state so they can achieve whatever their dream may be. Nobody should be held back in this state, but far too many are. So, as Attorney General, at the end of the day, it's simply about reminding ourselves about what our collective values are. Standing up for people, speaking up for the most vulnerable, not leaving anybody behind, and when we see an injustice, to speak out against it and fight against it, because an injustice anywhere is an injustice everywhere. And let's strive to remember the words of Lincoln to work towards a more perfect union. That's what's at stake in this election. Thanks for having me.
Mr. Welch.
Thank you very much. You know, I don't like at all what's going on in Washington, but I like being there, and I'll tell you why. Every single day when you wake up is the same decision that you have to make that I have to make. Am I going to use that day to try to make myself a better person in my community, a better place? And my goal every day is to straighten out Washington so it can work for you. Because our job there is essentially to try to have policies that make it possible for people back home to be more successful in what they're doing. We're not succeeding in Washington, but I've had a couple of inspirational experiences this past year. The day after President Trump was inaugurated, hundreds of thousands of people marched, led by women, on the Capitol Mall. And the crowd far exceeded, despite what the president says, the attendance at the inauguration itself. And what that was people coming together saying, we believe in each other, we believe in the democracy that we've inherited, and we're going to work hard for it. And the other one that was so inspiring was the march in Montpelier, the rally in Montpelier led by students after the Fairhaven Near shooting, where students of all kinds, all different identities, we're in charge of this, and we're speaking out about the need for gun safety, but respecting gun rights as well. That's the kind of Vermont I want, but that's the kind of country I want. Thank you all very much.
Mr. Wilhoit.
Thank you, Williston Central. Thank you so much for the students for having me here today. I'm running to be your Attorney General because I am the Vermont story. No, I wasn't raised in Vermont, but Vermont became my adopted home, and my entire professional career has been here, dedicated to working for equality for all and striving to learn not only from my own mistakes, but to better ensure that everyone has a chance, or a second chance, and Vermont is a beautiful place for that. For those of you that had a chance to get to learn more about me and working on the questions, you'll know some of this stuff, but I'll let the rest of you know. I did go to Vermont Law School. I was so privileged to go there and graduate in honors. After that, I started to do public defense work and also worked in the Prisoner's Rights Office. My whole life as a lawyer has been committed to working for indigent families and youth and adults. And it was in that work that I then went to the legislature in hopes and prayer that maybe one day I'd be on the Judiciary Committee so I could really effect greater change. And I'm so proud of the work that I did this past 2 years. But to be frank with you, many of the things that I sought to do to really truly reform our criminal, juvenile, and social justice issues were blocked. Not by me, not by my Republicans, but actually by the Democrats on that committee. And it's a shame, because oftentimes we'll use R's versus D's instead of working for real change. I will work for real change and be the voice of equality for all for Vermonters. Thank you.
Ms. TYNIO.
Thank you all for having me, and thank you for taking time out of your day to listen to the political issues of the day. It's so important that we all take time to study and make an informed decision. Over the course of your lives, you will be required to make decisions on who to vote for. And I hope that this has been a learning experience that you can take with you. And I also hope that you understand that as American citizens, you can do what we do. You can stand up for your country, and you can go to Washington and you can influence the country on behalf of the population that you represent. And I hope that you take that with you and understand that many of you won't, but some of you might. And I hope that we who are going to be elected or are elected currently will always be there to help and guide you with that. It is very important to me to support our country and to support the state of Vermont and represent us well. We currently are doing very well at building our economy, protecting our citizens, making sure that the future looks bright for all of you, and I will be a supporter of all of that. It is so important to understand that the country is always changing and moving forward, and we don't want Vermont to fall behind. I want to be the leader for the new generation. I want to be the leader for the current generation, and I want to be the security for the retired generation. I will be there for every Vermonter, and I appreciate you taking time to listen to me today. Thank you.
Ms. Sanders.
Hi. We've heard a lot about democracy here today, and we believe a vital democracy requires an informed electorate, civil discourse, and bold progressive ideas. Today, the informed electorate is in view. It certainly seems that the teachers in this school and the students in this school are doing their homework and asking and being involved in many of the big questions. So thank you very much for that. That's one of the reasons that Senator Sanders is really sad not to be here. He's had about 9 rallies around the state during this campaign, and he had 4 this weekend, but having to be in Washington to vote on the Kavanaugh issue is keeping him away. I think that in terms of civil discourse, one of the other things that we need to recognize is that we have to get money out of politics. What we can do as individuals is when we see negative ads and we receive negative mailers, all paid for by large donors, and certainly not in the spirit of civility that we in Vermont value, tear them up, turn them off, tell the media that you're not interested, tell the candidates, stick to the issues. We want to know what you're for. We don't want to know who you're against. Why are we voting for you? I think that one of the things that we need to recognize is that Vermont has led the nation for many, many years in terms of values, and we hope to be able to continue to do that. That's one of the things that Bernie really enjoys, being the voice of Vermont in Washington, D.C.
Mr. Turner.
Thank you for having me here today, and thank you for listening and being so respectful of our differences of opinion. I've lived in Vermont my whole life, and I've been a public servant nearly as long as I've been alive. As town manager, state representative, and a 35-year member of the Milton Fire Department, serving the last 14 years as chief, I've been on call for my community. Now I want to be on call for all Vermonters as your next Lieutenant Governor. Whether it's the cost of childcare, housing, healthcare, college, taxes, or fees, Vermonters are struggling out there. We have a crisis of affordability in this state. With Governor Scott at the helm, we've been able to make progress, but we have much more work to do. As your Lieutenant Governor, I will focus on the core issues of curbing our rising cost, bringing opportunity to all corners of the state for jobs, education, and strong communities. Throughout my career in public service, I've focused on bringing people together and getting things done. That's our motto, getting things done. I'll bring the same spirit of collaboration to the Lieutenant Governor's office and serve all Vermonters equally. I believe we're missing leaders who know how to collaborate under the Golden Dome, and we need to fix that. I'm confident that if we work together and focus on our key priorities, we can put our state back on the path of prosperity. It will be an honor to serve as your next Lieutenant Governor. Thank you.
Ms. Hallquist.
I'm going to tell you why I'm running for governor. When I made that decision was January 20th of this year. I was down in Montpelier for the Youth March, and I listened to these 4 young women. They were high school seniors. They called themselves Muslim Girls Making Change. They were doing slam poetry on what it was like to be Muslim in Vermont, the harassment they faced every day in their schools and in their communities, and I cried because this is our Vermont. I cried, and that's when I decided to run for governor. Now, I will tell you that I love Vermont. Vermont is an awesome place to live. And I know we can grow this economy and we can put more kids back in the schools. And we'll do that by connecting every home and business with fiber optic cable throughout Vermont. Fiber optic is the only way to get connected to the internet that competes with the urban areas. And we'll also rebuild our Vermont communities. We'll also continue to move towards Medicare for all because we should not be making a profit on people sick and dying. And I will unite with other states to achieve this goal. I will also ensure that we can continue to move forward on solving climate change because I know we can. Now I will tell you that running for governor is not the hardest thing I've ever done. And I also will tell you that I am not going to cower in front of any headwinds from Washington. And I'm going to be strong and form unions with other states. And I also will tell you nothing is impossible when you're on the side of justice.
Ladies and gentlemen, students of Williston, distinguished candidates, this has been a really wonderful forum. On behalf of Williston Central School and the Social Studies Committee, we want to wish all of you successful campaigns and present our most sincere gratitude for you for sharing your time and expertise with us here today. Let us once again show our appreciation by standing and presenting a final rousing round of applause.